Good evening and welcome, everyone. It is a pleasure to have you here and to have you so close. This is a super casual, low-key kind of service, and you've all volunteered to be part of it. So thank you so much for volunteering. I appreciate that. The service itself is pretty simple. We'll start and we'll share some communion. And then I'll invite you into an adaptation of foot washing. It's not foot washing, so everyone relax. But it'll be symbolic like that. And then we'll have the reading of Scripture. So I've got the pages printed out. And if you would like to read one, please do that, but don't feel pressured like you have to. If I end up reading all of them, that's fine. If you want to read one, that is also fine. And you'll notice with these sheets, at the bottom of your reading, so here's your reading, and they go in order. It says one candle is extinguished. So if you choose to read, when you're done reading, take the snuffer and put out any one of the candles. And then take the paper that you read from, the single sheet, and crumple it up and toss it by the cross. Okay? I think that is all you need to know. And so I have not spent a lot of time organizing or figuring how all the moving parts of this are going to work. We're just going to figure that out together. When we invite you into the time of washing, I'll invite you to do that in partners, and we'll just figure out how that works. And so it'll be a little bit chaotic and bumpy, and that's good. That's what this kind of service is all about. At the conclusion of the service, after the last candle is extinguished, I'll play a song. And after that song, you're invited to help me take down the purple flowers, the purple anythings, and we'll begin using the black cloths that are over there to drape over the piano and the cross and that lectern, and the majority of this table is like we're entombing the church as we wait for Easter morning. And then once we do that work in silence, we'll simply just leave, again, in silence. It'll be awkward, and we'll kind of like, is it really time to walk out? No one said go. Yes, that's the time. Once we've put the black cloth over everything, then it is time for us to depart. Any questions? Anything I didn't explain well enough? We're just going to figure it out as we go along. Great? Okay. Again, don't truly feel like it's an invitation to read today. If you are uncomfortable with that, don't volunteer. If you're comfortable, please do so. And there is a microphone here so that we can all hear. Good evening, welcome. Come as close as you can. I was just telling everyone that you've been come on, one more. We're all real close. You've all been volunteered to be part of the service, super casual, very participatory. You'll figure it out as we go along, but you've been drafted. Welcome. Let us begin. You can hear in the background, there are the sounds of a meal going on. It's actually the sounds of a restaurant. It's always how I imagine it being in Jesus' time, that all of those sounds, we're all sitting up forward, come on down. That's how I always imagined it for Jesus and his disciples. It was busy, all the things of life that go around making and preparing and eating a meal with family and friends have been going on. There's a hustle and a bustle and a joy. Sit as close to the front as you can. We're all sharing in tonight. And in the midst of that chaos, in the midst of that informality, those bumping the table and spilling the juice, that is the context in which this meal happens. It is a meal that is a surprise. It is a ceremony that took something that they had done for a long time and changed it, twisted it. Jesus is being a rebel, and there was a right way to do this, and Jesus is doing it the wrong way. And yet, in that sacredness, there is something holy. We're invited to participate in a sacred mystery that we don't ever fully understand. We get glimpses, but never quite all the way. Tonight, the bread that we are using is gluten-free, and the cup is one of juice. As we prepare, let me play a different song for you, or a song that is different than the ambiance we have going on.
They've got bars on the stained glass to keep all the blessings inside. Locks and chains on the doors to guard those gold crosses they hide. But there's a man in the doorway who lives on the street. He touches the chains and they fall at his feet. Says, come to the feast. There's always room for one more, and there's all you can eat. You can take some to go, gather all you can hold, and then go spread the feast. She thought she was so big she'd go without eating for days. All her bones got so frail and her heart was just wasting away. But now she stands strong and whole at the table of grace. Tears fill the cup as they fall from her face, and she says, come to the feast. There's always room for one more, and there's all you can eat. You can take some to go, gather all you can hold, and then go spread the feast. Burning, the table is spread. A voice rings out clear like one back from the dead. Out across the battlefields, up from the slums, over borders and color lines, the same message comes. And it says, come to the feast. There's always room for one more, and there's all you can eat. You can take some to go, gather all you can hold, and then go spread the feast. There's always room for one more, and there's all you can eat. You can take some to go, gather all you can hold, and then
In the midst of chaos, Jesus took the leftover bread at the end of a meal. I always picture it having a bite taken out of it. It wasn't the good stuff. It wasn't this fancy stuff that we have prepared. And he took that bread and he broke it. And he gave thanks to God that they were so fortunate to have leftovers at the end of the meal. And he shared it with his disciples. And he said, "This is the bread of life. This is my life that has been broken, that will be broken for you. When you eat this bread, do so knowing me, remembering me, remembering and knowing my life, living my life." So the disciples took, and they ate, and they knew God. The same meal, after they had eaten the bread, Jesus took the cup, the leftover cheap stuff at the end of the meal. He thanked God that they had leftovers at the end of the meal, and he poured it. And he gave it to his disciples, saying, "This is the cup of the covenant poured for you. This is God's hope for new life in you. Take, drink." So the disciples took, and they drank. And the food nourished their bodies. Their time together nourished their souls. And the mystery that they participated in continued to feed them as they would later go out into the world to be God's hope, to be God's love, to be the embodiment of everything that Christ worked for in the world. When we gather at this meal, we participate like the disciples do. It's not simply an act of remembering. It's an act of experiencing and feeling something within, a connection to God, to the work that God calls us to the brokenness of ourselves and the brokenness of the world. Tonight, I will take this bread and cup, and I'll serve the first person. And once then you have been served, I'll invite you to take the cup and the plate and to serve the next person. There are no requirements for this cup and this plate. If you wish to know the presence of God, you are invited. If you are not comfortable sharing, don't partake. That is fine too. Simply take the cup and take the plate and serve the next person. And we'll make sure that we have all been served. These are the gifts of God for us, the people of God. So I'll invite you to tear off a small piece of the bread, dip it into the cup, and then you may eat and then serve the next person. And if someone needs help with the cup or the plate, I'll trust you all to take care of that.
got bars on the stained glass to keep all the blessings inside. Locks and chains on the doors to guard those gold crosses they hide. But there's a man in the doorway who lives on the street. He touches the chains and they fall at his feet, and he says, "Come to the feast. There's always room for one more, and there's all you can eat. You can take some to go, gather all you can hold, and go spread the feast." She thought she was so big she'd go without eating for days. All her bones got so frail and her heart was just wasting away. But now she stands strong and whole at the table of grace. Tears fill the cup as they fall from her face, and she says, "Come to the feast. There's always room for one more, and there's all you can."
It was the day before the Passover festival. Jesus and his disciples had finished supper. And so the dishes were cleared away and the night activities were taking place. Everything was getting ready for the festival and the holidays to come. Jesus rose from the table and took off his outer garment and tied a towel around his waist. Then Jesus poured some water into a wash bin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to dry them. The disciples said, and Peter said, "Are you going to wash my feet, Lord?" And Jesus answered, "You do not understand what I am doing, but you will understand later. Never at any time, Lord, will you wash my feet." And Jesus replies, "If I do not wash your feet, you can no longer be my disciple. Lord, do not wash just my feet, wash my hands and my head, wash all of me." And Jesus replies, "Anyone who takes a bath is already completely clean and does not need to wash." After washing the disciples' feet, Jesus put his outer garment back on and returned to his place at the table. And he spoke to all of the disciples, and he said, "Do you understand what I have just done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and it is right to do so because that is who I am, your Lord, your teacher. And I have washed your feet. You then should wash one another's feet. I have set an example for you so that you may do just what I have done." What I will invite you to come forward in pairs of two, if that's possible, and if it's not, if there's just one of you, just come up and someone else will stand up to help you. I invite you into a time of symbolic hand washing. The trick is you cannot wash your own hands. You need someone else. And so come up, and one person can take just a little bit of the water and pour it onto your hands. You might rub that person's hands or simply just hold that person's hands, and then grab a towel and dry that person's hands, and then switch. It's not just the washing of hands. Oops. Quiet. It's not just the washing of hands because we need clean hands. It is an act of humility to, one, allow ourselves to be cared for in such a way by somebody else, but also to act, to do the caring of such a basic and physical need that we all have. In Jesus' time, they all wore sandals and they walked everywhere and they didn't have nice, clean roads. Washing of the feet really would have been necessary, and it would have been messy and dirty and probably smelling. So hands are much better. But still, it carries the same kind of message. An invitation to humbly serve and to accept the grace that other people offer to us on behalf of God. So again, I invite you to come forward, take turns washing and drying hands, and then after you have done that, return to your seat. So come. If you don't want to participate, you do not have to participate. It is simply an invitation. And I'm going to go grab a few more towels while we start that. Probably behind is where you have the most space. disciples didn't fully understand the meal that they shared. They didn't fully understand the significance of Jesus washing their feet. And yet, they experienced it. Yet, they went on out into the world, into the troubled and broken times that lay ahead of them, times of joy and celebration that led ahead of them. It was all part of the experience. That night, though, wasn't just about the meal that they shared. Wasn't just the foot washing that they shared. It wasn't just all the time that they had spent together. It was a mark that from that point forward, everything was different. In the following days, Jesus was killed and hung on a cross. And they had no idea what was happening. They had no idea if they were safe themselves or if the same fate awaited for them. They spent days, probably weeks, in hiding, afraid for their lives, not understanding the call of discipleship that was already upon them. Tonight we depart in that awkward silence, that same kind of feeling of not quite knowing, of not quite understanding, not sure what the experience is going to be for us. The first of the shadows, John 18, verses 1 through 12. After Jesus had spoke, he went out with his disciples across the Kidron Valley to a place where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, because Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas brought a detachment of the guard together with police from the chief priests and the Pharisees, and they came there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, knowing all that was to happen to him, came forward, and they asked them, "Who are you looking for?" They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus replied, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they stepped back and they fell to the ground. And again he asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." And Jesus again answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you are looking for me, let these other men go." This was to fulfill the word that he had spoken. "I did not lose a single one of them of whom you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it, and he struck the high priest's slave and cut off his right ear. And the slave's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into its sheath. I am not to drink the cup. Am I not to drink the cup that my Father has given me?"
The second of the shadows, John 18, verses 13 to 18, 25 to 27. First, they took him to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jews that it was better to have one person die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter was standing outside at the gate. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out, spoke to the woman who guarded the gate, and brought Peter in. The woman said to Peter, "You are not also one of the man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it and warming themselves. Peter also was standing with them and warming himself. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. They asked him, "You are not also one of the disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Did I not see you in the garden with him?" Again Peter denied it, and at that moment the cock crowed.
Third of the shadows, John chapter 18, verses 28 to 38. Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid the ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover dinner. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he had indicated the kind of death he was about to die from. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king, but for this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is the truth?" After he had said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, "I find no case against him."
Fourth of the shadows, John chapter 18, verses 38 to chapter 19, verse 16. Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, "I find no case against him, but you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews?" They shouted in reply, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now, Barabbas was a bandit. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. And the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head. And they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and striking him on the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no case against him." So Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." When the chief priests and the police saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no case against him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die, because he has claimed to be the Son of God." Now when Pilate heard this, he was more afraid than ever. He entered his headquarters again and asked Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. Pilate therefore said to him, "Do you refuse to speak to me? Do you not know that I have power to release you and power to crucify you?"
Jesus answered him, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are no friend of the emperor. Everyone who claims to be a king sets himself against the emperor." When Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus outside and sat on the judge's bench at a place called the Stone, or in Hebrew, Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation for the Passover, and it was about noon. He said to the Jews, "Here is your king." And they cried out, away with him, crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Shall I crucify your king?" The chief priests answered, "We have no king but the emperor." Then he handed him over to them to be crucified. And so they took Jesus.
Fifth of the Shadows, John 19, verses 16 through 27. Then he handed him over to them to be crucified. So they took Jesus, and carrying the cross by himself, he went out to what is called the place of the skull, which in Hebrew is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on either side, with Jesus between them. Pilate also had an inscription written and put on the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this inscription because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, in Latin, and in Greek. Then the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews." But this man said, "I am King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, one for each soldier. They also took his tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from the top. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see who will get it." This was to fulfill what the scripture says, "They divided my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots." And this is what the soldiers did. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home.
This is John chapter 19, verses 28 to 30. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home. After this, when Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, "I am thirsty." A jar full of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit.
It is done.